studio at your house?
Yeah, well, actually down the road from my house, but yeah.
Oh, look at you with a
I
separate
know.
location, a little
I
lair.
know. I know. I bought a house that had a 1,600-foot recording studio. Look at me.
Look at you go. Wow. That's like a 1,600-foot recording studio. That's like a whole nother residence.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much.
Is there a bedroom in there? Like, could you sleep down there if you wanted to?
There could be. There's a an assistant producer's room that was built.
Oh.
This was built by a friend of mine, John Kurzweig. John produced Eagle Eye Cherry, produced Creed, and we're still good friends. He and his wife split, so they sold the house. But he built this magnificent studio, and it's great because John can still work here.
Yeah.
Because we're buddies. So
And
I've
so
got my
can
area,
you.
he's got his. Yeah, it's
This
great.
is great. Well, welcome to the show, Gil Gross. I didn't expect to ask you about this, but it just happened, and so I shall.
Does it
But
start with the letter I?
it starts with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy
I was
saying,
thinking
yeah,
impeachment, but okay, yeah.
impeachment, the impeachment inquiry into President Biden. And we know it's political, right? Election season is here. They're trying to deflect attention from everything happening with Trump and company.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's no evidence, there's no proof. So what's the point?
The point is Kevin McCarthy is trying to keep his job. And basically, the MAGA right has demanded this, both for politics and also as kind of revenge. And they're looking at this. The interesting thing about this is there's a number of people from the House Freedom Caucus, which is, to the far right.
Those are the crazies, like Marjorie Taylor Greene and company.
Well, she's not in the House Freedom Caucus.
Oh, she got kicked off.
Kicked out, right?
Yeah.
And they're actually mad at her.
Yeah.
Some members of the House Freedom Caucus are against this move because they say, look, there's no evidence. We're just going to look foolish.
Yeah.
And so don't do this. If you find some evidence that Biden got money through his son's connections, sure, but you don't have it. And this is just going to tie up committees in an election year when people are looking for the House to do something. Because McCarthy is talking about tying up oversight, judicial, and House Ways and Means for this deal. And so basically, any chance to get any kind of meaningful legislation in an election year is now over.
Yeah.
It's done. It's just forget about it. So this is something that's even split a lot of Republicans.
Yeah, I don't get how they can move forward without any proof. I think you see Jim Jordan over and over again and his big claims of, oh, we have the bombshell. Here's the witness that's coming forward with the here's to make the dramatic connection between the president and his son and whatever. It's never materialized, and Jordan's the one who ends up looking like an ass.
The right has a history of this, and you remember during the Clinton years, instead of just being satisfied with, hey, Bill Clinton is stooping people he shouldn't be stooping. I mean, which was enough of a scandal in itself.
Right.
But no, they had to go, well, the Clintons are having witnesses to all of this extramarital affairs of Clinton murdered, which never made any sense because the women were running around. They were going on talk shows. They were... One of them was performing in Old Calcutta at a dinner theater in Columbus, Ohio. I mean, it's like, why would you kill people who knew about it when the women are running around and still saying it?
Right.
So, this is something that's going on. And by the way, there are people on the left like this too, I might as well mention it today, 9/11. It's not enough that Bush and Cheney cost us trillions of dollars and tons of American and foreign lives with needless wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. What they had to say, well, 9/11 was brought down by bombs placed in the buildings, and it was brought down by the Bush people. And it's like, Bush and Cheney did more than enough horrible things. Why stick them with something they didn't actually do and dilute your case against them other things? But there are people, including friends of mine, who are they're attached to this, and they have all these things, and you go, no, that's not true because of, this, that, or the other, the claim. And it doesn't matter. So that's some of what's going on here. There is one evidentiary thing, which is interesting, which could either put an end to this or give us the first evidence, which is now they will be able to subpoena banking records. So either there is money that flowed into Joe Biden's accounts from Hunter Biden's dealings, or there isn't.
Right.
And now they'll be able to subpoena the banking records. So either they'll end up with egg in their face, or I think it's unlikely, or they'll have something.
Yeah. It's frustrating to me. I don't know.
It's frustrating because this is right now based on nothing except Hunter Biden's stupidity.
Right.
And listen, there's a lot of stupidity in criminal action to go with Hunter Biden. I mean, there's this country has a horrible history of presidential relatives trying to make money off of the fact that they have a relative who's president of the United States. You had Nixon's brothers who took what was supposed to be campaign money, took $100,000 each from Bibi Rebozo, which was illegal. You had Billy Carter, who wanted to become a representative of Libya. People made excuses for him that, well, Billy's drunk. They even named a beer after him. And people are making that same excuse for Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden, not the most noble creature in the world. So the question here is not so much him. It's, did he involve his father in any of this? Now, Joe did something really stupid. Joe appeared on some of these calls before they got down to business and gave the impression that he might be a part of whatever dumbass I'm on drugs thing Hunter was doing. That was a mistake.
Yeah.
He probably did nothing illegal, but in trying to back his son up there as then vice president of the United States, he gave an appearance which he should not have done. But whether he actually did anything illegal, there's been absolutely no evidence of him doing anything illegal.
Well, listening to you, I'm struck by the fact that it seems that there's trouble, Democrats, or not necessarily this is the same thing, but people who are logical and reasonable and able to think about all aspects of an issue will say, yeah, Hunter Biden is doing some bad things, did some things that didn't make, sense, all these things that can look at the situation logically. If this was a Trump son, nothing, he did nothing wrong. Circle the wagons, there would be no admission of anything at all. So why is it that we can look at it and see, yes, some mistakes were made here, but on the Republican side, there's never an admission of anything?
Because that's become a Donald Trump cult. We've talked about this before.
Yeah.
It's not the Republican Party. It's not the Republican Party. I know. Look, my personal politics, now that I'm not a day-to-day objective journalist, I can say, I think people who listen to me on KGO, knew we're definitely liberal and progressive. Did that mean as a reporter, there were times you had to go, really? To some guy on your side, just seriously? Well, you got to put it out there and give it the same treatment as you would anybody else. And I knew plenty of conservative journalists. People don't believe there are such things. There are, who were capable of the same thing with their side. The party's become a Trump cult. And if you compare, and by the way, I'm not a fan of what about? Because if Hunter Biden did illegal things, he should be punished, whatever the punishment is. For the things that he seems to have done in terms of tax avoidance and not registering as a foreign lobbyist, these are things that generally get you a fine and not even prison time.
Yeah.
You compare the money involved there with what Jared Kushner did, which is take his job of negotiating Mideast peace and turn it into business contacts in which he's made not millions, billions, between $2 and $3 billion. His fund, which has nearly $3 billion in it, there's something like 5% that comes from domestic sources. All the rest is from people he was dealing with, supposedly as a representative of the United States in terms of trying to, bring peace and negotiate deals between Israel and the Middle East. So, it pales. But, Yes. Right now, we live in a world defined on social media as my side never does anything wrong and the other side never does anything right.
Yep.
And of course, most of what you get is BS from that.
Let's move to this this other topic. This is wild and crazy, and I don't know if a lot of people have heard of it. It's a story that was uncovered a couple of days ago by Politico, and it involves Ginni Thomas, wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
So the decision in 2010, the Citizen United case.
Yeah.
It loosens up restrictions on campaign spending, right?
Right.
And allows anonymous donor money to go to nonprofit groups.
Yes.
So according to this Politico article, Ginni Thomas and her friend, Leonard Leo, decide then that they're going to be the leaders of this conservative movement and open up all of these nonprofits type of organizations, get all of this money, and basically give it to their buddies.
And themselves.
Little for me, little for you, some for everybody.
Important part of the story is that Kellyanne Conway, for instance, funneled tons of money that supposedly went to Republican polling and gave it to Ginni Thomas. And part of the problem here is that nonprofits only have to report their top donors. And they basically can get out of, generally it's top 5 over a certain amount. And Jen, I think it's top 5 over $100,000. So basically you can hide tons of money that you give to people for doing nothing.
And they gave it to legal scholars to devise theories to challenge liberal precedents.
Especially one dean at Boston University got a lot of it. Yeah.
Helped elect state attorneys general willing to apply those theories, launched lavish campaigns for conservative judicial nominees who would cite those theories in rulings from the bench. Right.
Some of this, by the way, not the money that people pocketed. Some of this is perfectly legal.
Yeah.
It may not be moral or ethical, but this is politics we're talking about. And a lot of it was, in fact, perfectly legal. And in fact, when I've read some of the accounts of this skullduggery over the years, some of my first thoughts were, well, Democrats could have done this. Democrats could have started committees, and Democrats could have raised money and funneled it to people and started things. Democrats could have come up with more redistricting that would have benefited them when they were in power in states. They just never do.
Why? I mean, it seems like if somebody plays dirty against you for long enough, that you would then learn the same rules that they're using to get around having to, disclose where the money comes from, or like, why? I just don't understand how we can sit by and let people play dirty like this and do nothing. And now look at the Supreme Court. Roe v. Wade is gone, and it's all an orchestrated plot using this dark money.
Yes, and some of it is we're going to play the rules and we're going to be good people. Some of it is just the Republicans have more billionaires on their side. They're for lower taxes for billionaires. Trump made good in that. He did his tax cuts, most of which went to people that didn't need tax cuts.
Right.
There's just a lot of that, but some of it is, look, Will Rogers, so we're talking a century ago, said, I don't belong to an organized political party. I'm a Democrat. And not much has changed.
It's crazy. I don't know how this is, how we allow this to go on. I mean, it seems like this is everything we should be fighting against. Having money that we don't know who's donating it. We don't know where it's coming from. We have people that are able to keep themselves hidden because they don't have to say, who's on the boards of these nonprofits or who's actually behind it. It's all very cloak and dagger, it seems.
And the IRS has been deprived of their investigatory power by Republicans taking money away in appropriations from the IRS, which has been a wonderful two-edged sword for them. For the one thing, people hate the IRS. Even people that, get most of their money back at the end of the year hate the IRS. But the real reason for that is nonprofit charities are not allowed to indulge in politics.
Yeah.
And if the IRS enforced this, a lot of these nonprofits mentioned in the Leonard Leo and Ginni Thomas article would have had to cough up a lot of tax money, because what they're doing is basically under tax law illegal. But the IRS does not have the people to enforce this anymore. And Republicans have made sure of that. So, that's one of the big problems, that basically you have nonprofits who are involved in politics and giving money to politicians who aren't supposed to be able to do that. Worse, in the case of Leonard Leo, you have charities being used for personal enrichment, which is also illegal. But again, there's no enforcement.
No enforcement at all. And such a huge impact on courts and decisions. And I just,
sure.
yeah.
I mean, look at the, take something that is another story in the news this week, Mark Meadows trying to move his case from Georgia to the federal government. There's two reasons Mark Meadows wants to do that. A, if it's a Georgia conviction, if Trump does get reelected, he can't pardon him.
Right.
Can't pardon him for a state crime. But the other one is he's trading an enforceable law, which is Georgia's racketeering law that he's being prosecuted under, and also trying to force a public official to do something against the public interest, which was, part of the I just need 11,000 more votes deal. But also, this is interesting, Meadows is basically saying, yes, I know as chief of staff, but I was involved in electioneering. Now, violation of the Hatch Act. But why is he willing to say I violated the Hatch Act? There's no enforcement of the Hatch Act. Nothing happens to you if you violate the Hatch Act. If you violate the Hatch Act, somebody goes, it's like grandma, like, you've been a bad boy. Am I still getting a lollipop, grandma? Oh, of course you are.
No consequence, no repercussion.
Zero consequence, zero repercussion.
But question about this case, this dark money case with Ginni Thomas. She's married to Supreme Court Justice.
Yes.
She's personally benefiting both ideologically and financially from decisions that her husband is making. And they're all doing it in cahoots is what it looks like, right?
Yeah. Once
you start looking into this. So wouldn't that be illegal to have your wife, which is really your own pocketbook, right? Depending on if they commingle their money, I don't know. But it would seem like if your wife is being enriched by decisions that you have made, then you are personally being enriched by decisions that you are making because of your place on the Supreme Court. Isn't there some illegality to that?
It's funny. Somebody asked me this week, said, well, what about the case of Trump saying that the federal judge in his case should recuse themselves from the case? And I said, well, the judge isn't going to allow it. That'll be appealed then. And they said, well, won't that go to the Supreme Court? I said, there's no way that's going to the Supreme Court, because Roberts is not going to let the whole question of recusal come up in a case with Clarence Thomas sitting right there after all these cases he should have recused himself on. So that's just not going to happen. That's a bad look. They'll take whatever is the highest court decision before the Supreme Court, if it even gets appealed up to the Supreme Court, and they'll just let that stay without doing anything. In terms of illegality, it would depend on whether you could attach that money to things that the Thomases have used. Obviously, she supplemented her husband's lifestyle with that money. Here's where the argument may have a problem in court, and also maybe a waste of money for the people who supplied it. Clarence Thomas is not one of these cases like a David Souter or an Earl Warren, who started out on one side of the political fence and drifted to another once they became a Supreme Court justice. Right. Thomas was always a hard line conservative. I can't think of a single case that Thomas has ruled on where he might have ruled something differently if he had not gotten this money.
Yeah.
That may be their best argument in court. I mean, plainly, he got money from people who had an interest in cases. Plainly, he should have recused himself in these cases. Plainly, he has no ethics whatsoever,
right,
legally. That all said, there's no requirement for them to have that. It's a lifetime job. I mean, that's it. And in terms of impeachment,
it's a lifetime of having your hand out. Grift, grift, grift.
That's what it is. In terms of impeachment, it's one of the reasons why people like Alito are saying, no, Congress can't make any rulings about the Supreme Court. Plainly BS. Congress makes decisions about the Supreme Court all the time, including changing the number of people on the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So that's plainly nonsense. But still, you're never going to get the 2/3 in the Senate that you would need to impeach a Supreme Court justice. So it's just not going to happen. So unethical, absolutely. Immoral, yes. Illegal, I can make a good case for it. Actual consequence of that, can't think of any.
Wow.
Well, as long as there's no consequence,
then they keep doing it. Nothing happens. And people should be outraged by that. I feel they should be outraged by that. Reading that story and seeing what's happening, it's outrageous.
Yeah, there are justices that change over time. Like Alito was always conservative, but I remember, because I did the network specials when he was picked, and I talked to a lot of his colleagues on the courts in New Jersey, and they were all telling me, oh, I mean, this is a guy who's going to put the law first. He doesn't, he's not going to play politics. Yes, he's conservative, but he's going to, decide on the law. They saw him as another Sandra Day O'Connor type. Conservative, but playing by the rules. And Alito's an interesting case because I think it was because he became much more religious, which of course can go in any direction depending on your religion. But it became much more a part of his life, and it became much harder and drifted away. When you read his decisions, drifted away from lawmaking to, just kind of doing a talk show in the Supreme Court. But I don't think Thomas, if they hadn't paid him a nickel, I don't think Thomas would have changed one decision of his. This is who he's always been.
This is it.
So should he be profiting? No. Was it necessary to buy him off? No.
He would have made the same choices, but he wouldn't have, that the people that are benefiting from it wouldn't have benefited. And I think for them, it's all about that, getting what they can out of it all.
I think it's for them, it's getting what they can, and they feel better giving him money. I don't think it was necessary to give him money. I think they've thrown a lot of money away from him, but it's made them feel more sure or good. Thomas very rarely deviates. He's not a guy like Roberts, who, or even surprisingly, Amy Coney Barrett, who occasionally goes, well, I'd rather this, but there's no way. He's always been who he is. And I don't see that they've gotten anything for their money.
Yeah. Okay, let's move to what a case that you had already referenced, which is former President Trump trying to get rid of Judge Tanya Chutkan in this federal case in Washington, D.C. about interfering in the election. The Trump team is saying Chutkan has already prejudged him. And so that's because she has prejudged him, allegedly. She needs to recuse herself from this election obstruction case.
She's unfortunately made a case for them. I don't think it's going to go anywhere because she's going to deny it, and recusals generally don't go anywhere. And as I said, depending what the higher courts decide, I think the Supreme Court, with what's flying around Clarence Thomas and other justices, is going to stay as far away from making some kind of recusal decision as they possibly can. That said, the judge said some unnecessary things, like in one of the sentencing, blind loyalty to one person who, by the way, remains free to this day. Didn't say Trump by name, but, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, know what I mean. Everybody knew what she meant. She made a couple of statements like that. And it's she gave them grounds. Now,
Yep.
whether it's enough grounds for recusal, I don't think so. But did she give them reason for getting it at least before an appeals court? Yeah, she probably did.
Yeah. Yeah, I that worries me because I want it to be so ironclad. And so if she recuses herself, then who is the likely person to come in and take over? Is it a Trump appointee?
She won't recuse herself.
Yeah.
It would need a higher court to do that. I don't see any way in hell that she's going to recuse herself. If a higher court does that, it's going to be whoever's turn it is.
Yeah.
It could be a Trump appointee. It could not be.
Let's move to Mark Meadows, who you also referenced earlier. He
sounds like a suburb, doesn't it? Let's move to Mark Meadows.
Mark Meadows. It sounds so nice.
Let's move to Mark Meadows.
You know, green grass blowing in the breeze and wildflowers. Yeah. No. Mark Meadows, he says, listen, I want my case out of Georgia and I want it in federal court. And I'm worried that before this can be appealed, I'll already be convicted and incarcerated. Yep. That it's going to happen so fast in Georgia. So he wants the Georgia judge to put the decision not to allow the case to change venue to federal court on hold so that it can't move forward and he can't be convicted before this is even heard. Is that reasonable?
You know, try not to commit so many crimes in so many different districts. You know, I mean, it's you rob a bank, you kidnap somebody, and now you've got a federal kidnapping trial, and then you've got, you know, the bank robbery trial under state law probably, and all of this. And it's just try not to do that.
Right.
Yeah, I don't see anybody giving him this. I think 5 of the 19 have applied for this. And of course, as mentioned earlier, one of the things he's trying to do is get this to federal court in hopes that Trump gets reelected. And, you know, right now the polls are tight. And Trump gets reelected and everybody gets pardoned and goes home and that's it. The other thing is, as I said, if he got away with the acting in federal capacity thing, it would mean that he violated the Hatch Act because as White House Chief of Staff, he would have been strictly against the law for him to be involved in politics, in the political end of this. But as I said, the Hatch Act has no enforcement. So he would rather be found, oh, you're guilty of enforcing the Hatch Act. What does that mean? Nothing. Nothing. Put it on your resume. I violated the Hatch Act.
With the United States of America, I am telling you, I know we don't have a lot of time left, but I saw this story and I was surprised by it because I hadn't seen any of these allegations. And maybe my head's in a rock and maybe I'm just Trump all the time because I'm just still so hurt in my own heart by the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I expected anything differently, but just sad for my country. But I saw this facts first fact-checking story on CNN.
Yeah.
A source which I generally trust. And it goes through these, I'll call them lies or falsehoods that President Biden has made. And the last one was that he falsely claimed he was at ground zero when he said, I was there the next day.
Yeah, it was 9 days later that he showed up.
Leads someone to believe that he was there on September 12th. But yeah, as you mentioned, it's 9 days later. But they go on and they list all of these false claims that President Biden has made, including that he had witnessed a bridge collapse in Pittsburgh in 2022. He visited it 6 hours after it collapsed. He did not witness it collapse.
He witnessed the collapsed bridge. But he was not there to actually see it fall. Collapse. Yeah, absolutely.
He apparently said his grandfather died in the same hospital just hours or days before his own birth. But his grandfather died more than a year before he was born at that hospital.
In a different state, not even, much less the same hospital.
I mean, so what's with it? He also apparently had a conversation with an Amtrak conductor, but at the time of the story, the Amtrak conductor in question was dead. Yeah. So that couldn't have happened. Are we looking at a George Santos style lying, or is it just a memory thing, or what's happening with Biden?
So there's 2 Joe Bidens. I've covered Joe for a long, long time. I've interviewed him many times, not since he became president, but I interviewed him many times over the years, and in a way, this may be more to the point because he was young. So this has nothing to do with age. So there's two Joes. Mm-hmm. There's Joe. I think of Casey Stengel when I think of Joe. And I'll tell you why in a moment. There's Joe, the president, vice president, senator, hardworking, and knows every fact there is about situations. And when he's in that mode, he is right on target. He has his facts together and all of that. Then there has always been Uncle Joe. And Uncle Joe is like your uncle who wants to tell a good story. And by the way, I'm not making excuses for this because this is something as a politician, especially as a president, you should not do.
Be accurate, right?
Yes, but he's always had this Uncle Joe thing where he starts telling stories. And the stories, much as Uncle Joe at the Thanksgiving dinner table, always got like a little better. And everybody's like sitting around the table who knows the real story and shaking their heads. And they're not things like, and I won the war and things like that. They're, the kind of things that, say, Santos told.
Right.
They're embellishments.
Like spinning a yarn.
He's always been a yarn spinner. I don't know what that is. I don't know why he does it. He likes to have an audience, like get into the story, and it's better that he's there and things like that. Trump does this too. Trump said he saw, the Twin Towers fall from his apartment. There's no way you can see them from that apartment. He said he saw Muslims celebrating in the streets of Jersey City.
Never happened.
Yeah. But Joe does this. It's generally harmless. It's not about policy, but they are mistruths, or you can say lies because they're not true, which is kind of the definition of a lie. I don't know. He's always done this. It's not an age thing, if that makes anybody feel any better. It's always been Uncle Joe. I mentioned Casey Stengel before, and I'll just say this briefly because fewer and fewer viewers and listeners are going to remember Casey Stengel. But Casey Stengel was manager of the New York Yankees for years, later the New York Mets. And Stengel, before reporters, before the public, he never wanted to give anybody a straight answer. He felt it was none of their business. He felt if reporters asked, what was that pitch that Mantle hit? He didn't want to tell them what the pitch was because then the pitcher, if he forgot, won't throw it again. Why would he say something like that? Unlike today when everything's analyzed. And so he would do double talk and everybody would think, well, that's Casey. He's a little out of his head. And every player I ever interviewed, and I worked at the station of the Yankees for a few years, told me, yeah, that wasn't him in the dugout. In the dugout, there was no double talk. In the dugout, he was specific. He'd have a problem with names sometimes, but other than that, he was specific and had a reason for things and had a temper and all of that. There were two Caseys. There was the storyteller Casey. You never knew whether it was true or could even understand it at times. And then there was Casey in the dugout. There's Uncle Joe and there's Senator, Vice President, and President Joe Biden. Yeah. I don't know why he does it. I don't know him in any way that I could do even pretend psychology on it. But yes, it's true. He does these things where he says he's been somewhere where he wasn't. He did it when he's young. He does it when he's old.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I honestly don't know why. Well, it's not good. And it's a bad look because people are questioning his age.
Right.
All I can tell you is he did it when he was 40 as well, but it's not great.
No. Let's keep with, lastly, speech and how important speech is. I know that former President Trump has stirred up the pot by saying bullets will fly, right? We heard him say that. And now you have much less, unimportant in the scheme of things, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is talking about seceding. And she is saying that President Biden's border policies are traitorous. And she's already called for a national divorce. And now she says if the Biden administration refuses to stop the invasion of the cartel-led human and drug trafficking into our country, that states should consider seceding from the union. Is all of this speech with stirring up violence from Trump and then stirring up some type of secession thing? Last time we had a secession, we had a war. Is all this dangerous? Should there be consequences for this type of speech, or should we just be allowed to spout this kind of stuff and everyone go, all right, well, that's our opinion?
It's free speech. You got to be allowed to spout it. One of my mentors and a friend, obviously many years ago, is Fred Friendly, one of the great leaders of CBS News. And Fred wrote a book called Minnesota Rag, and it was about this anti-Semitic Minnesota newspaper that a major free speech journalism case was based on. And journalists held their nose and came to the defense of this crappy POS thing because it's free speech. Should she be allowed to say it? Yeah. I mean, and besides that, look, I'll tell you, this upsets my wife, who is upset by the idea. And we were talking about this a number of years ago, and I said, well, look, no country lasts forever. Mm-hmm. There's never been a country in the history of the world that lasted forever. That's why people still read Edward Gibbon's The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. Well, maybe I don't read it that much anymore, but it's it's why it was read for so many years.
Yeah.
And might there come a point where the United States breaks up, where everybody kind of goes, you know what, where I live would be a nice place without you? Yeah, it's possible. Yeah. There's no reason to think it's not possible. Countries do this. If you're a baby boomer, you were born when the sun really never set on the British Empire. Now, if it sets in Scotland, that's over. It. We're not so sure about Scotland.
Yeah.
So, is she saying it for dangerous reasons to try and stir up violence? Yes, I believe she is. If she speaks specifically of violence, you might have some kind of case. If she talks about armed insurrection, you would have a case. If she's just talking about secession is something that's possible, it's sure. And world history shows us it's something, probably not in our lifetime. The main problem for her has to do with, great, so if the United States takes all of its defense bases and shuts them down in states that secede, and you're on your own, somebody attacks you, good luck. We're not firing any missiles from any submarines for you. That becomes a real problem. And the Social Security checks stop, and the welfare checks stop, and all of that, all of the money that funds programs that comes from blue states like California, like New York and Wall Street, that money stops. Is anybody going to think in the practicalities that this is something good? No. But remember, here in California, I'm saying here in California for you, I'm in New Mexico right now. There have been many moves by people, especially in, very northern California, to secede from the state. And one bozo industrialist had the idea we were going
state of Jefferson, right?
Yes. Yeah. One bozo industrialist with lots of money said we should break into 6 states because the bureaucracy was killing us. In fact, it was on KGO. Yeah. I said, so explain to me how having 6 governors and 6 legislatures and 6 secretaries of education and 6 of everything and is going to bring us less bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And there was just silence. He had never even thought of it. It was just stuff to say. He had no practical plan for doing this. And it's the same thing with Marjorie Taylor Greene's secession. It's what happens when there's no federal troops to call on, you're calling on your state militias to patrol the borders and things like that, and who's paying for all of this? And she has it's just stuff.
Good luck in a natural disaster as well. You're getting no government funding, nothing.
Yes, they'll have to develop their own FEMA. all of that. You look at, oh my God, what's going on in Maui? I have friends over there working in the work to try and save that. And you've got EPA in there before FEMA can ever even get into real things, because not only you still have about 60 bodies distributed, but you have most of the houses that are over 50 years old. There's a ton of asbestos and other things. It's all in that ash. They have to apply an adhesive to all of that ash, put it into iron drums. And people aren't going to get back to their homes. They want to do that now. You understand that, but they're not going to be able to safely do that without exposing themselves to cancer until way into next year. These are the kinds of things that if you secede, you're going to have to develop all of these things to do them yourself. And a lot of the states interested in secession, like Mississippi, they don't have the money to do anything like that.
Wren writes, the immigration issues aren't going to go away. If you secede, they would primarily fall on seceded states. So she's right. You want to secede from the union because of immigration issues, or, what you perceive as the wrong way to handle it. You're not going to have the money to handle it, or maybe the manpower at the border to handle what you feel needs to be handled.
Yeah. They're not going to be able to do that. Not going to be able to separate out immigrants who want to legally come here, who are desperately needed. By the way, and you've talked to conservative business people, and they're saying, we need immigrants. We don't have anybody to do it. There's certain jobs that we don't have the money to have anybody to do. You've got that, and you've got, which is, major, but you've got the major problem we've always had with the drug crisis. And you see that in fentanyl and all of these other things. You saw in opioids, which were legally manufactured here in the United States. The problem is the demand side. Having people hopping over a border fence doesn't stop people who are bringing it by boat. Yep. Or down to Canada, which is the longest unprotected border in the world. It just doesn't do anything. So if you want to sit down, put politics aside, and have both sides figure out what to do about these things, and mainly on the drug side, how to stop the demand, because as long as there's billions of dollars in the demand, people are going to find a way to do it.
I said that was the last question, but I got this from Lori, who wants me to ask you, and I had intended to as well, but clearly I could talk to you all day long, Gil Gross. She wants me to ask you what the public climate is like in New Mexico regarding the ban on carrying guns in certain areas. And I think she's referring to Albuquerque, where the governor says no guns in open carry in Albuquerque because of a rash of gun violence for at least 30 days, right?
Yeah, we have open carry here in New Mexico, where I'm speaking to you from. I'm in Santa Fe. And except for federal buildings and schools. And what she is putting in is declaring this a public health emergency because of a number of shootings, especially of children, that have happened recently, that would stop you from even open carry in public areas and state property and schools and parks, except for law enforcement, of course, and licensed security guards. And you have to have a certain level of violence for this to kick in, and the only place that has that is Albuquerque, Bernalillo County. So that's the only place that would affect it. All of the pro-gun groups are already in court. I think there's at least 3 separate suits against this. And Governor Lujan said, look, they may be successful. I want 30 days to kind of let things calm down and see if we can figure out, how to deal with this.
Right.
But is it constitutional after the Supreme Court made that decision on the Second Amendment, which, by the way, was probably, if you read the Second Amendment, which I don't think they did, wrong. In fact, Robert Bork, going back to the days when you could talk to people on the other side, Robert Bork and I used to talk all the time. We disagreed on almost everything, but we had great conversations. And Bork surprised me one day because I asked him about Second Amendment, and he said, "No, Second Amendment is only about militias. It has nothing to do with personal rights at all." And he said, "Hey, I wish it did. I'm pro-gun." But he said, just it doesn't. And if Congress wants it to, they need to pass a law or a constitutional amendment saying that it does. And that was Robert freaking Bork. But look, we've had a fifth person's just been arrested in the shooting of a 5-year-old. There were some people that stole a couple of Kias, drove by a trailer, and just for the hell of it, it wasn't like, retribution or for a gang or something.
Right.
They shot this trailer full of bullets and killed a 5-year-old who was sleeping. There was an 11-year-old. This was a road rage case right near Isotopes Park, which is where our AAA minor league baseball team is, that plays and beats the Sacramento River Cats all the time. And it's a great ballpark. I go there all the time.
Yeah.
And this road rage shooting broke out, and this SUV, the people in this SUV had fired 17 shots at this car. The boy's aunt was critically wounded. She's still in critical and not stable. And an 11-year-old was killed. So that's what led to this. It's really problematical because the governor has control over state police, but the Albuquerque PD, interestingly enough, even though they get shot at all the time, said they won't enforce this. And the sheriff said that he won't support it either.
Wow.
So he won't tell his people. He said, I'm afraid of civil liability cases because it's so plainly against the Supreme Court decision of the Second Amendment. So, we'll see what happens. But it looks like it's probably not going to be enforceable.
Gil Gross, I adore you. I really thank you for coming on the Mark Thompson
Show. Oh, go on with you now.
I'm going to have you back. I will. Thank you for staying overtime. You've been here for a while, and I kept you over because I just love talking to you so much. So thank you for having the conversation, and I hope to see you really soon.
It's always a pleasure, Kim. Say hi to Mark and
I will.
And Tony, and thank you. Now I got to go back to work.
Oh, I'm sorry. By the way, any projects I should ask you about that you want to publicize? Anything you're working on?
Besides the next CBS special, which isn't until Thanksgiving, I'm one of the producers of a new podcast. I don't want to say too much about it. It's about homegrown terrorism. I'm doing mainly the writing on this. I'm not going to be on the air. That's mainly what I do now, is put these things together. And I'm very excited. We just got a major grant for it, and we've knocked out 2 of the first 8 episodes, but I want to wait until there's an official release date on this. But
when you have something to publicize, you come on back.
You got it.
Awesome. Thanks, Gil Gross. Have a great day.
Bye, Kim.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.